But the state of Texas says it's had enough. Texas today announcing it will withdraw from the federal government's refugee resettlement program. Governor Greg Abbott today said the resettlement program, as he put it, is riddled with serious problems that pose a threat to our nation, end quote. The governor then slammed the federal government, saying it, quote, lacks the capability or the will to distinguish the dangerous from the harmless. The Texas governor's announcement came hours after State Department spokesman John Kirby admitted that the refugee program could be exploited by radical Islamist terrorists.
I wouldn't debate the fact that there's the potential for ISIS terrorists to try to insert themselves, and we've seen that in some of the refugee camps in Jordan and in Turkey, where they're trying to insert themselves into the population.
The State Department spokesman, not the first official, of course, to acknowledge the potential threat to America. FBI Director James Comey last August warned of gaps in screening refugees, saying we can't vet them as we should. The Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, a month after that, more than a year ago, said he wouldn't put it past the Islamic State to infiltrate refugee flows, saying it was a, quote, huge concern. In Europe, border officials there for more than the past year have warned that radical Islamist terrorists, Islamic State terrorists, are already masquerading as refugees, already entering Europe with the masses of refugees. Yet President Obama is now calling for a 30% increase in the number of refugees to be allowed into this country, 110,000 refugees over the coming fiscal year, 40,000 of which are from the Near East and South Asia, which of course includes Syria. Mrs. Clinton, meanwhile, calling for a 550% increase in Syrian refugees. Only Trump is making any kind of sense on the issue of border security and the entry of both refugees and illegal immigrants into our country. We have no idea who they are, no idea where they are within our country. We have permitted Obama and Clinton to invite disaster, and they are planning to raise the scale of that potential disaster, and doing so without your voice being heard, your vote being cast or counted. Of course, you do have it in your power to change all of that by voting for Donald Trump on November 8th. Otherwise, if you think about it, your vote, well, it won't really change a thing, will it? It's in our power, and that's a good thing. Now the quotation of the evening. I thought Mark Twain would be appropriate as we head into the first presidential debate. And here's what Twain had to say about the facts the two candidates are boning up on. Quote, get your facts first, then you can distort them as you please. We're coming right back with much more.
Time now for our regular campus craziness segment. Students at Ramapo College in New Jersey say they were forced to change what they had planned to call an American barbecue because the name was deemed offensive. The website Campus Reform, which covers college news, published emails from an assistant residence director who told students the American theme was, quote, considered offensive, and so we apologize, but we will not be co-sponsoring with you. Despite that email, that Ramapo College denied trying to change the event. In an email to Fox News, the college said it regretted what it called confusion over the email. The barbecue did go on, but the name was changed. At Massey Hill Classical Academy in North Carolina, a high school history teacher was photographed stomping an American flag. The class was about a Supreme Court decision that said flag burning was protected by the First Amendment. Parents told the Fayetteville Observer that the high school history teacher also asked students for scissors and a lighter. The teacher has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of an investigation. The school's principal emailed Fox News and said the school doesn't, quote, condone the behavior. Cornell University will now join Brown University in offering feminine hygiene products in men's restrooms. An earlier edition of Campus Craziness reported on Brown University's decision to stock men's rooms with free tampons. Cornell students will now vote on a measure that would take things farther. It would provide free tampons and feminine pads in men's rooms. The measure is expected to pass. The executive vice president of Cornell's Student Assembly told the Cornell Sun, quote, "If passed, this would be one step toward gender equality." The university declined to comment. And speaking of Brown University, descriptions of race and ethnicity may be a common way for law enforcement to describe criminal suspects, but campus crime alerts at Brown stopped mentioning race nearly a year ago. The Brown Daily Herald first reported the story and noted that several students negotiated for the exclusion of race in the alerts last year because they believed the descriptions led to racial profiling. But even the executive director of the Rhode Island ACLU expressed skepticism about the change, telling the Brown Daily Herald that, quote, "If the point of these reports is to help identify suspects, I'm not sure it makes much sense to exclude race from the description." The university acknowledged the change, but noted the practice doesn't reflect an official change in policy. If you feel strongly about any of these campus craziness stories, tweet me using @BritHume and use the hashtag campus craziness. And if you have a campus craziness story that you want us to look into, let us know. Email us and tell us about it. campuscraziness@foxnews.com. We'd appreciate hearing from you.
We begin with this Fox News alert. Chaos in Charlotte, North Carolina after a black man was shot dead by police. Officers used tear gas to try to break up the violent demonstrations while people hurled bottles and bricks at police. At least 12 officers hurt. Squad cars destroyed, trucks looted, things set on fire. The interstate was shut down, and some in the black community tying it all into a string of deaths of black people at the hands of police. How to heal an America divided. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, host of Hannity on Fox Business, Hannity. Democratic strategist Julie Roginski. Former National Security Council member under Presidents both Bush and Obama, Jillian Turner. And today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, Iraq and Afghanistan war veteran, Pete Hegseth. He is outnumbered. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
As you heard from what I first opened up the show with, we have a lot of hard news to get to.
Yep. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it. The city of Charlotte is on edge. City leaders are pleading for calm after violent protests broke out overnight, all tipped off by the shooting of a black man by a black police officer. The family of 43-year-old Keith Lamont Scott says he was not armed, but police say he was armed and refused their commands to drop his weapon. What's happening in Charlotte comes on the heels of another controversial police shooting that happened last Friday. In Oklahoma, outrage at the killing of 40-year-old Terrence Crutcher by a female police officer who says she thought he was reaching for his pocket as if he were carrying a weapon and refused to follow her commands. It turns out Crutcher was not armed. Jonathan Searing, live with the news in Charlotte. Jonathan?
Harris, right now I'm standing in the driveway of the apartment complex where the shooting went down. In fact, on the pavement, you can still see the markings showing exactly where the shooting took place. Officers were trying to serve a warrant on an unrelated suspect when they noticed this man, Keith Lamont Scott. The police chief says his officers felt threatened. Listen.
Mr. Scott, as I said, exited his vehicle armed with a handgun as the officers continued to yell at him to drop it. He stepped out, posing a threat to the officers, and Officer Brentley Vinson subsequently fired his weapon, striking the subject.
Now, that shooting sparked a whole series of protests. They began peacefully, but then some protests got out of hand when some of the demonstrators began throwing rocks and bottles at police. At least a dozen officers were injured. Protesters are upset by what they say is a pattern of police using excessive force against black citizens. In the Charlotte case, the police officer identified in this shooting is actually African American, but protesters say that does not mitigate what happened.
You're exactly right. And it don't matter whether black or white, he was in blue.
At one point, the protesters blocked a portion of Interstate 85. Police had to temporarily shut down the interstate, but they managed to clear protesters from the highway well in advance of the morning rush hour. City leaders now are calling for calm dialogue to replace last night's violence. The protesters say they will be back out near City Hall and police headquarters this evening, but they say those demonstrations will be peaceful. Harris?
Jonathan, thank you very much. As we come out to talk about this, Hannity, I want to start with you. There was a news conference a while ago in Charlotte. I don't know if you caught some of it off the top. Nation of Islam leaders were there, and there was a question that was asked. At least when you looked at black media, is there a divide now in the black community, and what do we do about that? Because this police officer was African American.
Yeah, but that's what brings up one of the most interesting divisions. And, you know, it's what we saw the police chief in Dallas talk about. You know, instead of taking to the streets, come to the department. And, you know, there are a lot of black cops in this country. And when they are involved in shootings like this, there is a divide. And they are placed in a completely different section. It's no longer, you know, people of the same color in the same community reaching out, trying to do a better job of policing perhaps neighborhoods they grew up in. Now, if you are a cop and you are involved in one of these shootings, to people who are extremely vocal, like some of those people at the press conference, then you are now part of the blue squad.
Right. It's the blue now.
Well, yeah, and it should be. I mean, it shouldn't be about black or white. It is blue, and you got to put yourself in the shoes of that police officer in that moment, that black police officer, that female police officer, where effectively what they have are non-compliant individuals who are suspected for one reason or another, and that's where the black community would say, well, the motive is it's because they're black they're suspected. You can't get inside the head of that police officer. They're in a contentious situation, one where they had a gun, another where a much larger suspect than a female suspect is going toward a vehicle. These police officers make split-second decisions every single day, and to hear community leaders at that conference call for more rioting, for more protesting, for more violence, that's what it was last night. That was lawlessness.
Is that what you heard in what he said today?
Of course. The Nation of Islam leader talked about an economic boycott and then more of the same on the streets. And that Charlotte police officer, who was fantastic this morning, the police officer, when he talked about it, said, we're going to enforce the rule of law. Again, a black leader of that community also, because rule of law matters, and black people deserve it just like white people.
Yeah, you know, this was my criticism with the Colin Kaepernick and the hashtagging and all of that has gone on leading up to these points now. The real issues, Jillian, are not being dealt with. If there are questions about certain police officers and how they deal with things, are we focusing on getting unity together, or are we just hashtagging ourselves?
I mean, that's the key, and I don't want to sound like a Care Bear here, but unity is the key. And what happens in the wake of these kinds of incidents is that the focus is now not on what actually took place, but on looting and on lawlessness in the streets of these small towns, on cars being stolen. I mean, it really, people have to, at a certain point, hear the community leaders stand up and say that violence and looting and going out into the streets is not the answer. And that's going to undermine all of your objectives when it comes to trying to bring about racial inequality if you're the Black Lives Matter movement.
Okay, so the black president that we have right now has waded into some of these issues along the way. What should President Obama do now, Julie?
Well, first of all, he should echo exactly what Jillian said, which is no matter how outraged you may be about this, violence is not the answer, looting is not the answer, violent protest is certainly not the answer. But I have to say, I find it interesting in some quarters that people are more outraged about Colin Kaepernick taking the knee than they are about an unarmed black man being shot in Tulsa.
No, we're outraged about false narratives.
But wait a second. I don't know that this narrative is false. You're suggesting the narrative is that this white police...
It's been false in many instances for the Black Lives Matter movement. The truth hasn't mattered. The hands weren't up. I mean, those types of things actually should matter, and the narrative takes over.
And in some instances, they were borne out to be right. So the point here is that we need to all wait and see what happens. I do have to say we don't know what happened in Tulsa. Tulsa, to me, is a lot more complicated. It was an unarmed black man. This police officer clearly felt that she wasn't... The female felt that she was in danger. She felt he was reaching for something. It turned out he wasn't reaching for
Julie,
a gun.
Put yourself in your shoes. Hold on. You can't let that go. If this guy's walking, if she's telling him to stop, and this is a big dude, black or white, big dude, walking back to his car, and she's saying stop, and he's walking back and then reaching... No, there's videotape. I've watched it.
I've watched it. I have a quick question about that.
No, I don't know what she was saying.
Because it seems like, you know, first of all, we have to be able to separate these instances. As rational observers, we have to be able to say that what happened in Tulsa is different than what happened in Charlotte. There were different circumstances. There were different victims. There were different police officers involved. And here in Tulsa, the problem that I have is the bad communication between the officers. Because if one is using lethal force and the other is using a taser or stun gun, then they're not talking to each other.
Kennedy, you can't get inside the police officers that view different threat
levels.
Then
they have to get inside each other's heads with better communication.
You can't get inside everyone. It's like every
you actually.
But you can use that to defend.
We have to be able to have that conversation.
People perceive threats differently.
Who is to say that a cop pulls me over and doesn't automatically assume that I'm a threat and then shoots? I mean, you're assuming now that any time a cop says that they shot someone,
it's because they put their lives on the line for us, and we can't relate relate to it unless you've been there.
Pete,
she doesn't know what he could pull out of that car.
Pete, then any of us can get shot. Any of us can get shot with absolutely no compunction, because what you're suggesting is if the officer goes and
says... to that issue, statistically, more whites are shot and killed by police officers.
If a cop is telling you to stop,
stop. Blacks are.
If a cop's telling you to stop, stop. And if you don't stop and you reach into your window, that's a problem.
That's the cop's assertion.
Well, that's a pretty fair assertion in my mind.
Then you don't think that police officers are trained to communicate with one another if they're using lethal force?
Of course they are. I just think about, as a platoon leader who's been in Iraq and seen guys make difficult decisions, people perceive threats differently. You can't get inside everyone's head in the immediate moment. She pulls a gun, he pulls a taser.
Then no cop is ever guilty.
Put a button on this, because you bring this up. We know that we have a lot of members of our military coming back, some of them choosing to serve in different police departments. Perhaps some of that tactical strategy and that information that you're sharing will be something that will be needed in our police departments.
Of course, we can do
not
better.
Just to fight terrorism, but to do exactly what Hannity is doing, and that is to make sure that when you're watching your six, you're also watching your neighbor in front of you and knowing what everybody else is doing. We don't know what happened in these instances.
All right, very good.
Wait for the evidence.
And for the record, I'm always watching your six. This is a Fox News alert. We're getting new information on the man accused of planting bombs around New York and New Jersey. Federal authorities filing terrorism charges against Ahmad Khan Rahami. The criminal complaint says he raged in a journal about what he viewed as American attacks on Muslims. It says he also looked for guidance from people like radical jihadist cleric Anwar al-Awlaki, who was killed in a drone strike in Yemen in 2011, and Osama bin Laden. Rahami's arrest also marks 4 attacks carried out since last December by American citizens who spent time in Afghanistan, Pakistan, or Saudi Arabia. Rahami visited Afghanistan and Pakistan several times. The Orlando nightclub shooter went to Saudi Arabia, as did the Philadelphia police attacker and the San Bernardino killer. So obviously, Pete, this is something that all of these terrorists have in common. So what can law enforcement do? What can the FBI do better to figure out the motivations and possible radicalization? What can they do to get to the heart of radicalization before these events take place?
First of all, I think all of these underscore how overwhelmed our intelligence agencies truly are by the volume of information, the volume of travel, and the volume of the threat. Just because someone goes to Saudi Arabia, which could be part of a Hajj or something, and they come back, doesn't mean they're going to be a terrorist. But if you make multiple trips to places like Quetta in Pakistan or Afghanistan, that ought to put you on somebody's radar screen.
I've heard a lot of there.
Well, sure. I mean, if you're from there, but we don't always know exactly where they go once they get there. That's the problem if you're from there. I would say what I've heard from a lot of FBI agents and others and people that I talk to is, listen, it sounds like a talking point, but it's not. Political correctness ties the hands of so many law enforcement officials who feel like they can't raise red flags because they might be accused of being Islamophobic or anti-Muslim.
Well, citizens feel that way too.
Of course, citizens feel the same way. That's what needs to be stripped away if we're at war.
Let's
honest and candid.
Let's say hypothetically that this terrorist father called the FBI and said, you know, my son is up to no good. He stabbed my other son and he hit my wife.
Yeah, it says that hypothetically the FBI said, if this hypothetical were to be the case. But
we should tell our audience that all of that is
all of that
true.
Is not hypothetical. That actually all is
and
true.
It's not funny. Even
right.
Though
we're all laughing because it's not hypothetical. But what makes no sense to me is not that the FBI didn't do their due diligence, investigated, and said that he's not a suspect. But to your point, Pete, we are overwhelmed. There are so many people who travel this way. There are so many people who go back to their homeland. He's from Afghanistan. He was a 7-year-old immigrant who came here from Afghanistan. His father had fought on the side of the Mujahideen, which had trained a lot of terrorists, but in fact was on our side back when the Mujahideen was in existence in the 70s and 80s. And so what do you do with somebody like that? He's an American citizen. There's due process here. What exactly could have been done? Even if you profiled him, what could you have done? It looks like the FBI investigated. They found nothing. And to me, the question is, you're not radicalized until you're radicalized. You're not a terrorist until you commit a terror act.
Well,
this is a legitimate question.
I don't know what information.
Because I just to kind of complete what you're saying, he was radicalized to the point where people were noticing it when he was coming home. So you are radicalized when you are. The question is, when do you take action? So there is a news conference going on right now. The FBI is distributing the following poster. Can we pop it up? I'm hoping we've got it together. They are seeking information on 2 individuals spotted on surveillance camera recordings along one of the streets where that unexploded device was here in Chelsea, the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan. And their advisory now notes that these individuals removed the unexploded pressure cooker device from a piece of luggage. leaving behind the device and taking the luggage with them. It is not immediately clear if these men are believed to be associated with Rahimi. So that is information. We're watching this news conference that's happening right now in New York City. As they start to release some information, we'll bring it to you here live. This is really interesting, Pete.
Well, it sure is. You don't pull a pressure cooker out of a piece of luggage and take the luggage unless you, and not say something. We've got a see something, say something problem within the Muslim community. That's what it comes down to. If people saw those red flags and didn't call the FBI and say, this guy's plotting something, this guy's saying something, that's a problem, and we have to be willing to say that.
Or if they did call the FBI and, you know,
that was 2 years ago, but if we're seeing it in real time, you have to be willing to call that out in real time. If America is your country and your allegiance is
maybe our national security apparatus is overrun because we're spying on too many people and not focusing on the bad guys.
Wow.
Perhaps the net is too wide. And guess what is not wide? The length and width of the time that is making up how many days we are away from the first presidential debate. That is 5 days. And now reports Hillary Clinton is prepping for a tale of two Donalds. That's right, two Donald Trumps. While he's hitting her on her stamina once again, what could we expect Monday night? Plus protests outside the White House. Family members of 9/11 victims calling on President Obama to sign a bill that would let them sue Saudi Arabia for the attacks. He plans to veto it, but should he? And of course, after the show, you can join our live chat. Just click on the Overtime tab at foxnews.com/outnumbered. I did it, you do it. Or go to facebook.com/outnumberedFNC. And of course, you can tweet us. We will see you there in full force.
Brian, in the wake of the terror attacks in New York and New Jersey and Minnesota as well, the spotlight is once again on our border crisis. A new report from Breitbart lists 10 major terror arrests in the United States in the last 2 years, all involving people with alleged ties to ISIS who got into this country. Here to react, Congressman Henry Cuellar of Texas. He's a Democrat who has been a vocal critic of the Obama administration's border policy. Congressman, good morning to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
You know, the President of the United States has made it very clear he would love to see a lot of Syrian refugees in this country. He would like to see lots more refugees across the board into the country. And we detailed a moment ago how the mayors of Paris and London and New York wrote in the New York Times yesterday, we would like some more unfiltered refugees in the country. Is that really a good idea?
Well, just to let people in just because you want to fill an arbitrary number, I think that's wrong. You know, I believe in the immigration laws that we have to make them stronger, but we have to enforce those laws. And if we're going to let people in, we got to make sure that they're properly vetted. That's why some time ago I voted with my friend Michael McCall, Congressman McCall, to make sure we're talking about refugees, we got to make sure that we verify and certify that the people coming in are not going to be a threat to us in any way or form.
Okay, there you're talking about vetting. Suddenly, for a moment, you kind of sounded like Donald Trump, and now Hillary Clinton is talking about vetting as well, which, you know, she's playing catch-up on that. But, Congressman, when you look at the people who were vetted, supposedly, by the administration, allowed in the country, and this certainly is not a comprehensive list that Breitbart has put together, but you've got these 10 people over the last 2 years tied to ISIS. Those are the last people we want in.
You know, all it takes is one time to have somebody cause a lot of damage. And that's why, you know, the law enforcement and the people that go through this vetting have to be correct 100% of the time. And that's what I'm saying. If we're going to let refugees in, we got to make sure that we properly vet them, because all it takes is just one individual. We know what sort of damage they can cause to us.
Absolutely. Congressman, a moment ago we were talking about the bomber here in New York and New Jersey who, you know, yesterday the father said, yeah, I told the FBI 2 years ago my son was a terrorist. And then you look, he went to Afghanistan, he went to Pakistan a number of times, once over a year, and you start to realize, wait a minute, it looks like the feds may have not connected a lot of the dots. Unfortunately, the Fed's rules of engagement are in many cases outdated, and in fact they did great police work in finding the people, but maybe the whole PC thing is handcuffing our men and women who are trying to enforce the laws.
Well, look, you know, this thing about PC, I'll say this very carefully. PC cannot stand in the way of law enforcement doing its job.
That's right.
We have to make sure that we let the men and women do our job. We got to make sure that the Intelligence Committee, our law enforcement, FBI, that they do their job. And unfortunately, PC does get in the way sometimes. And again, I want to be respectful of religion. I want to be respectful of cultures. But at the same time, law enforcement has to do its job.
Absolutely. And of course, we've got all the Border Patrol people standing on the border between our country and Mexico, for instance, our southern border. You're from down in Texas. But the administration has placed a number of handcuffs on them where they don't really do their job. They're supposed to stop people who are not in this country legally, and yet a lot of people get through.
Well, what we're seeing is Border Patrol, and just a couple of days ago, I was talking to one of my friends at Border Patrol. We spent a lot of time talking very frequently, and one of the things that we're seeing is that they stop them. Then after a while, they're, as the administration calls it, they're doing a better job at, quote, management and processing. What does that mean?
Yeah.
That means that they can handle these folks coming in, but then they give them this notice to appear. And that in 3 or 4 or 5 years, they might show up in court, they might not show up in court, and they might just disappear in our community. So we have to make sure our men and women at the border have the right resources and make sure that they do the job that they're supposed to, and that is stop the bad people from coming into our country.
Absolutely. Call it notice to appear. It really is a notice to disappear, unfortunately. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Now, 5 days before debate number 1, Democrats offering up advice to Hillary Clinton for that first debate on Long Island, telling her to let Donald Trump do most of the talking because that's where he makes mistakes. Trump's campaign manager describing his preparations last night with Brett working for Bill O'Reilly.
He's doing many things. I mean, he prepares all of the time because he's a very brilliant businessman who's always taking in different pieces of information, weighing consequences and options. I think the Commander-in-Chief forum was a very good preview for what you're seeing, but Mr. Trump takes the debate very seriously, and he's preparing in his own way, as are we all.
Let's talk about that with Ed Rollins, former campaign manager for Ronald Reagan, chief strategist for Great America PAC, which supports Donald Trump, and Joe Trippi, former Howard Dean campaign manager and a Fox News contributor. Hello, gentlemen.
Good morning. Good to meet you.
What do you think about Monday night? I mean, you guys are ready for this, right?
Absolutely.
John Tester, Democratic senator from Montana, says he's going to say some cockamamie stuff. Give him the rope. On screen, you can look at it here. Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut. Inevitably, he's going to say enough dumb things to dominate the headlines. Where are you on that, Joe?
I think both Trumps are going to show up at some point in this debate. It's too long a period for him to be either sort of the quiet, more presidential guy and not go off script at some point. So I don't know about cockamamie, but I think we're going to see both of the Trumps that we've seen in this campaign pop up at some time in the debate.
Ed, what are we going to see?
This is the most widely anticipated debate, I think, in history, and I've been around this game for 50 years. I've never seen quite the excitement. People want a real debate. I think Trump is an entertainer. He has a great command presence. I think he will exceed any expectation that any of the Democrats have for him. She's a policy wonk. She'll basically rattle off a lot of statistics. The key thing here is for him, he can't push her or press her or not treat her with the composure, and she can't get strident. If she gets strident, she loses points. I think both sides get reinforced by who their candidate is.
Do you have information as to how Trump's preparing?
I have no inside information how Trump is preparing. I know that Kellyanne has prepared a bunch of books for him. He's not going through the traditional method of sitting down and practicing in the usual way, but every candidate is different, and every candidate you have to treat differently.
Because he said sometimes you get so filled with information, you get out there.
Well, that happened to Reagan in the first debate, and the second debate, instead of having a rally at the end of it, we had a rally at the beginning of it. Got him revved up. He came out and performed very well.
Yeah, and I don't think Trump's not a big book cracker kind of guy that's going to dig in there, and if he does, I think it's a mistake because there's no way to cram for something like this. I think Ed's right. It's better for him to go in and perform, to be the guy that's going to excite his supporters and try to stay within himself here and not go off script. I think the script part's going to be tough for him only because of the length, not because he's incapable of doing it, but because of the length of a debate. I'm not sure he's going to be able to maintain that the whole way, and she's going to try to bait him into coming off.
Is there truth? I mean, you hear that a lot, Ed. Is there truth to that? You know, because you're one-on-one, you're not dealing with 7 others or at one point 16 others.
Well, the problem when you're a policy wonk is you can bore people to death. One thing about Donald Trump is he doesn't bore anybody. There's an excitement and anticipation of what he's going to do and say. She can't falter in any way because of the health scare. So my sense, he's got a lot of energy. He's a big man. People don't understand how big he is. He's 6'3",
physically,
230 pounds, and he will overwhelm her in that sense. But he has to be very careful with that. He can't basically intimidate her.
I'm out of time because the press conference we've been having all morning. Where are we on Tuesday morning, do you believe? Care to go there yet?
No, I think the same place we are now.
You think so?
I think Trump will gain some momentum, and I think this state we're talking about right here, North Carolina, is going to be a real key, and this debate that's going on there is going to have a big impact.
Thank you, fellas. Look at Joe. He is smirking over there. Thank you, fellas, to both of you.
We'll see.
The O'Reilly Factor, the #1 cable news show for 16 years and counting.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Bill O'Reilly in the Miller Time segment tonight. Let's get right to the sage of Southern California. He's right up Interstate 5 in Santa Barbara this evening. So, Miller, what say you about the upcoming debate on Monday?
First off, Billy, I just went to pick up my Wetzel's Pretzels takeout order, and they wanted an ID. So let's put that to rest. Yeah, you should need an ID to vote. I mean, that's absolutely, I like that girl, but that's crazy for her to say that. And by the way, I see you're in L.A. I'm sorry I couldn't get down. I can only assume you're out there because the locals offered you your own Wolfman pentagram on the Hollywood Walk of Stars. So congratulations, my friend. I wish I could have been there for this.
The day that I get the Star of Fame on that walk will be the day that L.A. wipes out into the ocean. I mean, that's never going to happen. Yeah, that's going to be the day.
Earthquake.
But I'm going to tell everybody why we're here. Go ahead.
I won't be able to watch the debates because I'll be traveling. But I would encourage Trump, he better push it out there pretty far. I think he has to be leading by 8 to 10 points at Election Day, or let's just say there's a lot of Priuses out there being fitted with pneumatic shock absorbers to put all the fake ballots they can in the trunk. So I think Trump better push it out there pretty far, because the closer he gets, the more she's going to win by. It's just, that's the way I see it. I do have some ideas, though, to improve the debates, Billy. May I lay them on you, my friend?
Certainly.
All right. I think, first off, on their way to the stage, they should frisk both of them for a wire, because I think Hillary might have a wire. I also think they should have to blow on a breathalyzer just to see, just curiosity on my part. I think that instead of real moderators, we ought to have robot moderators, because I've been watching these debates for the last year. I see a lot of artificial intelligence up there. Why don't we make it actual artificial intelligence? Then I think they should vary the questioning. Some policy questions, but then every once in a while you throw in a times table thing. 12 times 11. That one always throws me off. See how quick they are. You ask them to spell a word. Aardvark. No, 2 A's. They blow that. They're out. General knowledge. You know, a little Jeopardy thing. Bring Trebek in. Then I think they should take Skype questions from actual people on a big screen over their head. First one should be Anthony Weiner, shirtless, just standing there having a question with them. It's a more, let's say, if Weiner does it, we can say it's a more hands-on approach to questioning. I don't think they should have bells or buzzers at these things. I think when they run up against their time, you should hear a big disembodied voice say, "Shut up now." No bells, no buzzers. Shut up now. And then, lastly, I think they should have ejector podiums like the Aston Martin in the James Bond film. If somebody's up there yanking us, boom, just shoot them off the podium into the
You're
sun.
out of there. That's right. If somebody says that isn't true, wham. Or they can be over water and then bang, right in the water. Okay, you know you know this guy Caliendo, Frank Caliendo?
Yeah,
you know
Frank's
him, right?
Great.
Well, he was on
great
Fox
guy.
and Friends this morning. Roll the tape.
When Dennis Miller enjoys himself on O'Reilly, there's nothing better than that. When he starts, I haven't seen anything like this since Megyn Kelly was teaching Frank Luntz karate in the Cantina bar and Star Wars. And then O'Reilly will shut him down. Come on, Dennis, that never happened. I know, Billy, but you're seeing it in your head right now. It's crazy, Billy.
He's got you, Miller. He's got you.
I'm honored. I'm honored. And he is cut to my very essence. Can I tell you? And Frank is the nicest
guy. He made one mistake, though.
I am flattered to be in the crosshairs of the best impressionist on the planet Earth.
He made one mistake. He said that I called you Dennis. He said I called you Dennis. That never happened,
Once on my birthday. Once on my birthday 4 years ago, you called me Dennis and you started to cry. It hurt you so much.
Brutal mistake. All right, there's Miller.
That's so funny. Brutal mistake. Brutal mistake, Miller.
All right, Killer's Mike. Martha McCallum on deck. There's some new information about the alleged terrorist who planted bombs in New York and New Jersey. Then the Factor tip of the day on not cooperating with the police. Factor's coming right back.
To lose. I'm going to fix it. What do you have to lose? And somehow that resonated. Some people didn't like it. But I said, what difference does it make? I mean, it's true. What do you have to lose? And it resonated, and it's been amazing how it's resonated because it's true. The Democrats have run the inner cities for, in some cases, up to 100 years, unbroken. Unbroken. And we're very different. I'm different. And I'm different from a lot of Republicans, frankly. And that's why we're winning states that aren't even in play for other Republicans. I mean, as an example, somebody said we're up in Maine. Maine's not a state where Republicans are exactly, flocking to. But we're up in Maine. It's an amazing, amazing thing. We're doing great in Connecticut. We're doing great all over, actually. So we're winning Florida. We're winning Ohio. I see we're winning North Carolina. We're winning, it's just an amazing thing. We're winning Colorado. We're up 4 points. And we're up in other places that are just amazing places and great. And we're thrilled. We just had a very good poll from New Mexico. New Mexico. So we're winning areas that are not usually areas that people consider in play. That's why you're seeing the boards. Remember the boards 3-4 weeks ago? The whole electoral map. Well, Trump has a very... Now all of a sudden all these states are opening up to say, wait a minute, what's going on here? And they're writing about it, and we are working very, very hard. And hopefully at the end, and I have to thank Mike Pence. What an unbelievable person this is. And, the first time I met Mike, I liked him a lot. And he was very much considered that this was going to be his position. A lot of people wanted him to run. He's done it, right? He's run incredibly in Indiana, very, very popular, has one of the most successful states. They have a AAA bond rating. Their taxes have gone down. Their employment has been incredible. And they brought companies in, one of the few places that has actually brought companies. It's been a great story, and the story he's done is incredible. But the first time I met him, we had a wonderful meeting, lasted 20 minutes, and I actually asked him for his endorsement because I was running in Indiana, which we won in a landslide, which was very nice. And he couldn't do that because of the fact that he had other commitments, and he endorsed Ted Cruz. But the next day when he made the endorsement, I thought it was more of an endorsement for me because he started talking about how great Donald Trump is. Then he said, I'm voting for Ted Cruz, and let's get back to Donald Trump. The guy's unbelievable. In fact, Ted Cruz didn't know whether or not he was endorsed. Most people thought he endorsed me. I thought it was one of the great. But I liked him. I liked him, regardless. I liked him a lot. But he said something. After that first 15 or 20 minutes, I left, and he said, Donald, may we pray? Now, that doesn't happen too often coming from New York when I leave an office. It's usually like they have bad thoughts. Believe me, bad thoughts. But he said, did you know that, Pastor? He said, may we pray? Now Daryl's really inspired by Mike. But Mike is great. And we did pray. And Mike is great, and his family, Karen and the family, are incredible. So that was a really good choice. I wrote some things out that I think so much about. Thank you. Thank you. Stand up, Mike. Karen, stand up. Amazing. He's been an amazing partner, and he's all over the place. Yesterday he was in Virginia, and it was a downpour. They had a great group of people, and I never want him to get the kind of crowds I get, because I'll probably then get angry at him and jealous. But he'll teach me not to be jealous, something Daryl's going to work on. But he had a great crowd yesterday in Virginia, and there was this massive downpour, like record type setting, and they were all outside, I guess on a lawn, and they were drenched. And he said, called me up, he said, nobody left. And the press actually covered it. They said nobody left. They've never seen anything like it. And that's a good sign, because I think we're going to do really well in Virginia, too. So that's a good sign. So, Michael, thank you. And very special guy. And Omarosa, don't leave Omarosa. She's a wonderful woman. Don't leave. She's a wonderful woman. She has done so much for me with the African American community, with communities generally, and she's another one. She is such a fine person, and nobody knows it. And I just blew her income for the next 20 years. You are amazing, okay? And I just want to thank you very much for